welcome back. Well, today we're going to look at the concerns for the Jehovah's Witness leadership. We have all 11 there. You see up on the top there, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have the 5 powerhouse guys on the top there. Splain, Let, the Norway guy, what's his name? What's all the guys' names here? Okay, we're going to try this again. The first guy up here is Sanderson. Then we have Jackson, who went to the who was a part of the Australian Commission. And then we have Stephen Lett, the guy that's has all the weird faces and eyes and stuff. And then we have David Splain. He thinks he's the boss. We have Loesch. He kind of thinks he's the boss too. And then we come to the bottom here. We have Samuel Hurd. He's getting old. We have Kenneth Cook. I don't know if he's still the president. Flegel?
Windbag.
Winder. Flegel. And the new guy, Rumpf. And the real estate? Jadelli. So those are our guys. Those are the guys that are really concerned. There's a lot of concerns for the leadership. The leadership is failing. We're going to take a look at some of their serious problems they're having right now. And we're going to skip over to this article. It's from Avoid JW, Concerns for the Jehovah's Witness Leadership. Now, Jehovah's Witness unity and Jehovah's Witnesses unity and control hangs in the balance as its leadership struggles to maintain power amidst growing criticism. So we initiated, Avoid JW, an interesting and detailed critique of the Jehovah's Witness teachings regarding the 144,000, the sealing of the number in 1935, and the evolving doctrine regarding anointing and those required to have a heavenly calling when becoming members of the governing body. The subsequent discussion is a fascinating, eye-opening, and enlightening. So you guys are going to enjoy this. It really shows that they have some serious problems with their doctrine. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, you'll want to take a look at this. Now, the 1935, the governing body, the avoidance of accountability, the 1935 doctrine on the sealing of the 144,000 suggested the heavenly calling was about complete. In 1935, it was emphasized in publications, at least until 2006, with the release of the revised publication, Revelation, its grand climax at hand. And it says, see chapter 20, paragraph 18 and 19, while the doctrine has been gradually abandoned, absence of a formal apology or written clarification stands out as an issue for those seeking transparency. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so here's the Revelation book. If you remember that red book that we studied about 3-4 times, they pummeled us with this book, complicated book, little kids reading it. It's they never retracted any of the stuff. Look at this picture here, child sacrifice, holding your child up to Jehovah. You're sacrificing your child. If it needs a blood transfusion, no blood transfusion. Your child has to die. You sacrifice your child to Jehovah. And that's child sacrifice. They even make a picture of it there. Revelation Grand Climax. So that's the book. And it's a long book. 23, 24, 44 chapters. We're going to go to chapter 20. Multitudinous. What a word. Multitudinous, great crowd. Having describing the sealing of 144,000, John talks about it. So we're going to go to paragraph 18 and 19. And here's some of the pictures. Jehovah's up there. It looks like Jesus is beside him. And this is the great crowd. This is what they taught us. From Rutherford's time, 1935 is when that started. Before 1935, there was no great crowd, which is interesting. Russell didn't have that. They were all the same, all going to heaven. Okay, so we're going to look at 1819, these two paragraphs. During the 1920s and the early 30s, the John class had stressed the heavenly hope both in publication and in the preaching work. John class being the 144,000. And apparently the full number of the 144,000 had yet to be filled, but increasing numbers of those who heeded the message and who showed zeal in the witnessing work came to profess an interest in living forever on a paradise earth. They had no desire to go to heaven. That was not their calling. They were part of the little flock, but rather of the other sheep. And their being identified in 1935 as the great crowd of other sheep was an indication that the choosing of the 144,000 was then about complete. It's interesting how they do that without any scriptures, and they just make assumptions and all of that kind of stuff. That's what they do. Let's see what happens. Do statistics support this conclusion? Yes, they do. In 1938, worldwide, 59,000 witnesses shared in the ministry. And of these, 36,732 partook of the emblems at the annual celebration of the memorial of Jesus' death, thus indicating that they had a heavenly calling. And in the years since then, the number of these partakers has progressively decreased, principally because faithful witnesses of Jehovah finished their earthly life course in death. And in 2005, only 8,000 partook of the memorial emblems. That's 0.05% of the 16,390,116 attending that global observation. You see, when they have the memorial, there's a lot of non-baptized witnesses that attend, so the number gets inflated like that. And back then, there was, the hall would overflow, we'd have the memorial, and there wasn't enough seats. Us brothers would have to stand, and the hall would fill up. A lot of people would come. They thought the end was coming. And in paragraph 20 it says, when the Second World War broke out, Satan put forth bitter efforts to stop the harvest of the great crowd. Jehovah's work was restricted in many countries. And during those dark days and shortly before his death in January of 42, Rutherford was heard as saying, well, it looks like as though the great multitude is not going to be so great after all. But divine blessings directed otherwise. By 1946, the number of witnesses ministering worldwide had jumped to 176,456, most of these being the great crowd. And in 2005, there were 6,390,022 witnesses who were serving Jehovah faithfully in 235 different lands. Truly a great crowd. And the number keeps increasing. So, what do they say? Do statistics support this conclusion? They figure that it was coming to an end, that it was done. So we're just going to look at paragraph 18. You notice it says they're being identified in 1935 as a great crowd of other sheep was an indication that the choosing of the 144,000 was then about complete. So that's what they were teaching, that back then the 144,000 was pretty well done, 1935. So let's see what's happened recently. What's going on today? Well, if we look at, we get back into the article here, it says the inclusion of individuals like Rump and Jadell and Winder and Flegel, born long after 1935, suggests a significant shift in the interpretation of the 144,000. And their heavenly calling is now viewed as ongoing in terms of their role as governing body members, and rather than their role being tied to a specific historical period. So they snuck in there somehow. You know, if we took the emblems as a layman in the congregation, we're the great crowd, they would have looked sideways at us and said, I'm sorry, brother, I think you got it all wrong. You're part of the great crowd. They would tell you where you belong. And next year you probably wouldn't take the emblems. You'd feel embarrassed. They will embarrass you. But yet here we have Rump, Jadell, Winder, and Flegel, all younger than me, And they can get away with taking the emblems. It suggests that this is a bunch of BS, and they have a big problem. So their heavenly calling is now viewed as ongoing in terms of their role as the governing body members, rather than their role being tied to specific historical period. And the directive in January 2016 study edition of the Watchtower, see page 25, paragraph 10, where members are discouraged from asking anointed personal questions about their anointing, has the potential of shielding leadership figures from scrutiny. It is a possible mechanism to maintain authority without being held accountable to the worldwide congregation. Let's just take a look at that. Okay, we got the Watchtower, January 2016 study article, so we'll take a look at that. So here in the Watchtower, it says in paragraph 10, how can we show appropriate respect for those whom Jehovah chooses to anoint? You see, they wrote this for these new ones that are taking the emblems, these new governing body members, so they had to put something in there. We would not ask them personal questions about their anointing. We would thus avoid meddling with what does not concern us. So this is kind of new in this Watchtower in 2016. Back in the 80s, wasn't anything like this. They'd question the heck out of you. But now they had to change it because they wanted to anoint these new governing body members, so now they had to make it easier. And no one could ask questions. They'd call it meddling with what does not concern us. So, if we started talking about this right now, we're meddling kind of with what doesn't concern us. That's what they're saying. That's how they dump this, so no one looks at it. No one looks any further. And it just sits there as an unanswered question. It says we should not assume that the parent, spouse, or other relatives of one of the anointed would also be anointed. So you don't assume that. And genetics or marriage play no part in the process. And we should also resist the urge to quiz spouses of anointed ones about how they feel, knowing that they will live without their mate in a future earthly paradise. And rather than raising questions that many cause pain, all of us can have full confidence that Jehovah will open his hands and satisfy the desire of every living thing. And that's how they sum it all up. So we shouldn't quiz people. This is what they're saying, 2016. They should just accept these anointed ones now. And so they cleared that up because these guys probably got anointed back in 2016, so they had to kind of make way for it and make it okay now. Okay, we're going to go back to the article here. And yes, so we looked at page 25, paragraph 10, where the members are discouraged from asking the anointed personal questions about their anointing. And it has the potential of shielding leadership figures from scrutiny. It's a possible mechanism to maintain authority without being held accountable to the worldwide congregation. The sealing of the 144,000 was evidently a false teaching, and however, there has been a lack of apology for this doctrinal error. The absence of an apology for such a false teaching resonates with the critics who argue that the organization should acknowledge and take responsibility for misleading doctrines. Okay, doctrine, integrity, or accountability. The evolving interpretation of doctrines like the 144,000 anointed raises questions about transparency, especially when significant changes are made without openly addressing past errors. And on one hand, the organization like Jehovah's Witnesses do grow and refine their teachings over time, but failing to acknowledge mistakes or directing members not to question certain practices can come across as authoritarian or dismissive of legitimate concerns. And this dynamic becomes even more problematic when it involves leadership selection, as it could lead to perceptions of manipulation or self-serving policies. And it seems that for the most members, the promise of Paradise Earth outweighs any discomfort with inconsistencies or doctrinal shifts. And the focus on the ultimate reward acts as a powerful tool for maintaining loyalty, even in the face of concerns about leadership or past errors. And for a small cohort who question, the culture within the organization probably makes it challenging to voice doubts openly. And the emphasis on loyalty, obedience, and unity, coupled with the risk of ostracism or being labeled as spiritually weak, makes critical thinking a high-stake endeavor for many. So people just don't ask questions. The critical mass and dissenters. It's fascinating how this dynamic mirrors patterns seen in other high-control religious groups. How do the critics reach a tipping point where their concerns gain more traction? A critical mass of dissenters is necessary to challenge or force meaningful change in any authority structure. And without a significant and growing number of individuals willing to question, the leadership can continue to operate without addressing the underlying issues. And this ensures that the status quo remains intact, as isolated dissenters are easier to dismiss or silence. So if you ask questions, you will be silenced. And in groups like Jehovah's Witnesses, the mechanism for maintaining conformity, such as shunning, discouraging independent research, dissuading higher education, and promoting a fear losing out on paradise, are highly effective at preventing dissent from gaining momentum. And as long as the majority remain convinced of the ultimate reward and the view questioning as spiritually dangerous, the leadership's authority remains secure. Now, the importance of exposure to external information. How do we disrupt the balance? How do we encourage more questioning to drive leadership accountability? Well, in short, access to information is a powerful way to challenge an organization's control. Websites like avoidjw.org, jwchildabuse.org, and jwfacts.com play a pivotal role in peeling back the layers of secrecy and exposing practices that would otherwise remain hidden. For members who begin to question, discovering this kind of information could be the spark that deepens their doubts. And the leadership's efforts to discourage access by vaguely referencing avoidjw.org without naming it outright, and you can see the study edition on April 2018, page 30 and 31. Let's look at that. Okay, so here's the Watchtower, April 2018, and we go right to the end here. This is where they talk about it. It says, no one may post our copyrighted publications on other internet sites. Downloading our publications from anywhere but JW.org is potentially dangerous, and Jehovah has entrusted the responsibility of providing spiritual food to the faithful discreet slave alone. You see how they single it out? They're the only ones that know the truth. And that slave uses only its official websites to publish spiritual food, JW.org, tv.jw.org, and wolf.jw.org. And we have only 3 official apps for mobile devices, JW Language, JW Library, and JW Library Sign Language, and we can trust these products to be free of advertisement or contamination by Satan's world. So that's how they knock down sites like Avoid JW, and they get their people not looking at anything. That's how they control them. So it's evident that they're attempting to avoid drawing more attention to it. Also reflects on how significant a threat this platform is perceived to be. The founder of the website receiving a cease and desist order of this website we're on around the same time as the release of this Watchtower shows they are not just dismissing the website as irrelevant, but actively trying to curb its influence. And despite the leadership's insulation strategies, the internet creates an unprecedented challenge. Members curious to explore these resources may find themselves questioning more than they ever thought possible. But for this to lead to widespread change, a tipping point in awareness and courage among members would still be required. Critical voices are gaining traction. The combination of websites like avoidjw.org, jwchildabuse.org, and jwfacts.org, and personal stories. So here's some good websites you guys can put in your kit. You can use them to answer questions. And personal stories and critical analysis on YouTube create a powerful counter-narrative. And hearing firsthand accounts of shunning, abuse, and doubts can resonate deeply, especially with those who are beginning to feel disillusioned. And these stories humanize the issues in ways that doctrinal arguments and external criticism might not. And the rise of YouTube channels sharing personal experiences also highlights the courage of those willing to speak out. And for many members or former members and even non-members, it can be profoundly validating to hear others articulate what they may have felt but struggled to put into words. And together these efforts chip away at the perception of unity and infallibility that the high control group often projects. Systematic change possible? It is clear that online platforms are helping to build a growing network of awareness and support. But what is the end goal? Well, we've recently seen some superficial changes where the leadership allows beards on men, pants on women, and a brief hello to expelled members. And that's just recently. These may appear to soften Jehovah's Witness control over their members, but the core practices remain as rigid as ever. And the continued directive to cut off family members who are expelled, particularly those who simply wish to leave the faith, demonstrates how deep control mechanisms are, how they're deeply embedded. And these superficial changes are more like a public relations strategy to counter criticism and give the illusion of relaxing control or modernization rather than a genuine shift in policy. And the underlying goal of maintaining obedience and isolating dissenters is unchanged, which is highlighted how these tactics are used to preserve the group's authority while deflecting external scrutiny. Now, the refusal to address the human rights implications of shunning, especially for those who want to leave without hostility, continues to be a glaring issue. And however the leadership sees these small changes as a way to pacify critics while maintaining their overall control. And therefore, significant change can only occur if there is sustained pressure from within or outside the organization, coupled with a growing number of members willing to demand it. And we cannot dismiss these small changes, though. Small changes like allowing beards or a brief greeting can subtly signal to members that the long-standing rules are not as divinely fixed as once believed. Couple this with the doctrinal change in who can claim to be anointed post-1935, it may plant seeds of doubt or encourage more members to question other beliefs or practices or policies. These changes show that external pressure, whether from critics, former members, or human rights organizations, and internal pressures, the progression of time, questioning members, or existing members, it can influence the group. And as awareness of the problematic beliefs and practices continue to grow, the leadership might feel compelled to implement more meaningful reforms to maintain their reputation and membership. As younger members, who often are more exposed to modern ideas, the online information, rise in influence within the organization, they might push for further changes. And incremental shifts pave the way for broader, more progressive reforms. And whatever the leadership does as time goes by, as members continue to age, as problems continue to mount, questions continue to be asked. Doctrine continues to adapt, and critical mass gathers pace. Armageddon fails to arrive, and the paradise remains nothing more than a hope. Change will happen. Of this, we are confident. So that brings an end to the article with Avoid JW. Thank you very much for putting that out for us, Avoid. And doesn't show who authored that, but I guess it's Avoid JW. They have different writers. So concerns for Jehovah's Witness leadership, the 144,000, why are these new members taking the emblems and getting into the governing body? These are all questions that we and you have. So it'll be interesting to see how they continue to change their doctrine. Well, thanks again, folks. And remember, Keep living your life with love. We talk to everyone. We love everyone. We don't shun. And we don't do what we used to do as a Jehovah's Witness. We make a change. You have to get out of the organization to really live your life with love. Well, thanks again, folks, and we'll see you on the next video.